You're listening to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast network.
You're listening to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast, the most listened to daily Miami Dolphins podcast on the internet. Come on, Dolphins fans. Time to fins up.
All right, Miami! Miami's got the Dolphins, the greatest football team. We take the ball from goal to goal like no one's ever seen. We're in the air, we're on the ground, we're always in control. Hey, when you say Miami, you're talking Super Bowl. 'Cause we're the Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins number one. Miami Dolphins.
Good evening, Miami Dolphins fans. How are you tonight? And thank you for listening to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast on this Tuesday, April the 16th. I am your host, Michael Leva. Another episode of our draft preview show, as I am joined by your in-house draft guru, Dante Collinelli. Dante, how are you doing tonight?
Doing great, Mike. Happy to be here, talking about some guys we might see come off the board to Miami in a little bit.
I think so. Tonight we're going to break down the edge rushers and defensive tackles. We know two positions where the Dolphins need some help at. So we're going to talk about those guys, which ones might be in play for Miami at 21, which ones might be in play for Miami at pick 55, or if Miami wants some late round sleepers and such, we'll talk about all them. But before we get to any of that, as always, a big shout out to everyone listening at finheaven.com. Everyone go to finheaven.com, the largest Miami Dolphins message board on the internet. Also, a shout out to our friends at the I Am a Miami Dolphins Fan Facebook page, run by the great and talented Carlos Hernandez. If you're on Facebook, please be sure you are part of the I Am a Miami Dolphins Fan Facebook page. And wherever you're listening to this podcast, whether Spotify, Apple Podcast, Podbean, Podchaser, YouTube, Audible, we're on all the platforms. Subscribe. You don't want to miss an episode. We're going to have shows pretty much every night leading up to the draft, and then draft night, Thursday and Friday, wall-to-wall coverage with Stephen D, Jason Sarney, and a bunch of us popping on here and there. So you're not going to want to miss any of that. So make sure you subscribe to the Dolphins Talk YouTube channel. All right. Edge rushers we're going to start with. And I think round one, I think we're going to see at least 3 go off the board, possibly 4 or 5. Is Dallas Turner the top edge rusher in this class? And is there any chance he falls out of the top 10?
So I think he will be the top edge rusher for the NFL. He's not my personal top edge rusher, but I do think he'll be the first one off the board. And I do think that there's a chance he falls out of the top 10. I actually don't think it would be crazy because I think when you look at the top 10, I think there's one defender that goes in the top 10. It's Atlanta's pick at 8. So if Atlanta's pick is not Dallas Turner, which it probably is, I think it's better than likely, but I think everyone else in the top 10 is going to go offense. I think we're going to see quarterbacks come off the board. I think we're going to see receivers come off the board. So yes, Turner could fall out of the top 10.
Yeah, but it won't be far, is what you're saying. So, there's no chance he's going to fall anywhere near 21. Like, if he falls out top 10,
No.
You're thinking like 12 or 13 max, probably.
I think the latest he goes, and this is like the latest, like the bare minimum is 16 to Seattle. I don't think he falls further than that.
Yeah. Okay. So the next 2 off the board in some order are either Jared Verse from Florida State or the kid from UCLA, Latu. I can't pronounce the first name. Latu. Which one is ranked higher in your eyes? And what's the odds of at least one of them being on the board at 21?
So Latu is actually my top ranked edge rusher, period. I think he's the best in the class from a technical perspective. I just have a really, really hard time believing he's going to be a bad football player. I think when you look at somebody like Dallas Turner, you see a little bit of a better athlete, somebody with a higher ceiling. So I understand why at edge the NFL is going to gravitate towards that. I like Latu though, man. He's so good. Technically sound against the run, has a lot of pass rush moves. He's a weird one though, because he has the medical red flag, and I believe it was neck fusion surgery he had. So he was forced to medically retire after a couple years at the University of Washington. Their doctors would not clear him to play. I believe he did end up taking a full year off from football before returning. UCLA's doctors cleared him to play. And he's done nothing but eat the Pac-12 alive since coming back. 2 seasons of phenomenal film and really good production. And all the reports that I've seen, everything that I've heard is that the medicals checked out at the combine. Now, obviously, those things tend to pop up, a little bit closer to the draft. Sometimes it's almost a little fishy how close to the draft they tend to pop up. But as of right now, it seems like the medicals are good for Latu. So if the medicals are good, I don't think he gets to 21. But I thought the same thing about Jaylen Phillips a few years ago, a similar player who also wore number 15 and attended UCLA and medically retired. He ended up going to Miami. But you see the similarities there. Phillips' medicals checked out, and he ended up falling to the Dolphins anyway. So I think there's a chance for Latu. Verse, I'd be surprised. Verse is my edge too. I think with him, you're getting a player who has really good power, really good size, right? Like I think he's like a big end for you. I don't think he's like a stand-up outside pass rusher. I think he's a hand in the dirt, 3-point stance. He wants to get into the guard and tackle's chest and push, pull, swim, move his way to the quarterback. He's fast. He's got some juice. Like I'm not saying he's he can't move or anything like that, but I think he's mostly a power rusher. He's going to work his hands. He's going to use his strength, a bull rush, long arm club, stuff like that. So I really like Verse. Does he get to 21? There's a chance. There's a
every mock draft right now, from Mel Kiper to Peter Schrager, which I know they're mock drafts, and you always take it with a grain of salt. But every mock draft in the past week has Verse to Miami at 21. It's like, is everyone going to be wrong? I mean, yeah, it has happened before. Clearly, it's a mock draft, but it's like that's where everyone's talking. Hell, even my mock draft, I'm going 21 to Miami.
I think it'd be a good pick. We can talk about that. I think that's I think it'd be a strong pick for the Dolphins because I think for Miami at edge, they have to get a player who contributes immediately. And I think that's one of the reasons that Latu and Verse are more appealing. I don't think Dallas Turner gets there, but let's say hypothetically they have an opportunity to select all 3 of these edges. I think Verse and Latu stand out to Miami immediately because those are players I think you can get immediate pass rush production from. And you're the Dolphins, obviously good news about Jaylen Phillips. It seems like, he thinks he's going to be ready for the season. I hope he is. I'm a little skeptical of that, if I'm being completely honest.
I am too. Even if it's early September, mid-September, that's still good news. I don't know
yes.
Week 1, though.
No, it's all good news. I'm very happy.
Yeah,
I'm just,
exactly.
I don't know about him playing week 1. I hope he does. He's a freaky athlete. Maybe he pulls it off. I'm skeptical of that. Bradley Chubb is not going to play week 1, and I don't know how many reps I want Shaq Barrett playing. I think he's a good rotational player. That's a good signing, but I think you need to supplement him with another player. And so that's why Verse and Latu would be the most appealing to me at 21. We'll talk about some of the interior guys, but they would be pretty high on my ideal pick for Miami. They would be up there. We talked about Amarius Mims on last week's show. That's kind of my low-key, my personal favorite, but I think Verse and Latu would be right in that sort of tier.
Okay, and let's just say, hypothetically, they want to take an edge in round 1, and all those guys are gone, which takes us to the next grouping, which are the 2 Robinsons. You got Chop Robinson from Penn State and the Robinson from Missouri, Darius Robinson. Well, the one from Missouri, is he more of a classic 4-3 end? And is he a scheme fit for Miami who's going to run mostly 3-4?
He's a really weird one. So
He seems like a classic 4-3 end.
When I watched him originally, I actually graded him as a 3-tech on the interior. I actually thought he was going to kick inside. I think he could be a big end for you, though, right? He's got the size, he's got the length. I think you like the way he defends the run, the way he sets the edge. He's got really, really good power. So I think maybe not a scheme fit for I don't know. I struggle with that one because
I like him, but
I think he's a good player, one. So I struggle with that. I'm a big fan of drafting good football players. I think he's a good football player. And then 2, I think you can kind of mold him to what you want him to be. I think you either add weight and you kick him inside, or he's a bigger end, hand in the dirt, almost circle Emmanuel Ogbah type player. And and then you kind of kick him inside and like 3rd and long, right? And you get him rushing over guards. Maybe you replace some of that pass rush juice you lost with Christian Wilkins going to the Raiders. So Robinson's a weird one. He's not quite the cleanest fit. Chop Robinson from Penn State is a stand-up 4-3 outside linebacker. This is just speed. He's got all the traits: athleticism, burst, explosiveness. I mean, Penn State, it feels like they got one of these guys every goddamn year. There's somebody who just jumps out of the gym, runs out of the combine every year. Adafeowe, Micah Parsons. They got 2 this year. I got Chop Robinson. Adisa Isaac's not quite that level of athlete, but he's a very good player. So they just have one of these guys every year, just these freak athletes. Chop's got a long way to go technically. This is a player who is really inconsistent, man. His best reps are maybe the best in the class. You go watch the Michigan film. I mean, he's hitting J.J. McCarthy before the left tackle's out of his stance. I mean, this guy can fire off the ball, and those highs are, I think, going to get him drafted inside the top 20. Like I just think the NFL loves this type of player, loves this type of edge rusher. I don't know that the Dolphins go after him though. I don't quite see him as a fit necessarily for what they're doing, especially given that they're trying to win right now. And to me, Chop Robinson, not really a win now type player.
Yeah. So those, I would say, 5 names most people think are your edge rushers in round 1. Did I miss anyone? Do you see anyone else sneaking in? If there's a 6th to go in round 1, possibly, who might that be? Or are those your, 5 guys who will probably go in round 1? The Robinson from Missouri might even fall in round 2, but are those like your round 1 guys?
So I think so. There'd be 2 guys who I think could get in. One of them's Chris Braswell from Alabama. I think he's got the pedigree of a first-round pass rusher. So if you kind of buy into his development, I could see like a team trading into the back end of the first round, or maybe Baltimore just takes him and he develops into a star in 3 years because that's what they do. The other one I would name, and I don't think he's a first-round pick, but Mike, every year there's a pick in the first round where we all go, who? Right? Like
exactly.
The collective goes like, oh my God, really? Marshawn Nealon from Western Michigan is like that type of player. Now, I really like him. Like, I think he's good. I would not take him in the first round. But if he goes at like 29 to Detroit or like 26 to Tampa Bay, I would not be shocked just because he's super athletic. He's a super unique player. He plays really hard. I can see Dan Campbell watching his film and being like, that's my type of guy. And the Lions have proven they're willing to take whoever the hell they want in the first round and tell everyone to shove it later and go almost win the NFC, right? So those would be the 2 names that I think if they don't go in round 1, I think they go really early on day 2.
Okay. Some other names. So say they wait to 55 for an edge. Obviously, the names you just mentioned could be in play. A couple others here. Braylon Trice from Washington and Austin Booker from Kansas, who we know had a visit with Miami, I think last week. And of course, the other kid from Penn State, who you mentioned, Isaac. Would they be in play at pick 55, or is that too soon, you think?
I think that's about right for Trice and Isaac. I would say something off recent draft history and just draft history in general. Edges taken outside of the first round are not very productive NFL players. Edge actually has one of the biggest discrepancies in production from round 1 players, in pass rush production at least, from round 1 players to every other round. It is not a gradual drop off from round 1 to round 2. It is a cliff. And so when you're talking about taking edge rushers in the later parts of the draft, you have to be careful with where you set expectations, because edge, especially recently, has become such a premium position that like guys who have the athleticism to produce at a high level in the NFL are not making it out of the first round, which is why I talked about Nealon and Braswell possibly sneaking in. Now, to answer your question, Trice and Isaac, I don't think would be too early at 55. I like Isaac. I just think he's like a rotational guy who gets you 5 to 6 sacks a year. He plays okay against the run. He's a solid football player, but you're never really talking about him as like the guy in the room, right? So when I think about the Dolphins, I think that they need to maybe get a guy in there who's going to replace Bradley Chubb in 1 to 2-ish years, right? And so Isaac can be a guy in a room, but I don't know that he's someone that replaces Bradley Chubb long term. Like, I don't see that.
See Andrew Van Ginkel then?
Maybe, yeah, very different player, but I think like rotationally speaking,
same
right?
type
like,
of production, 5'6", 6. He's not forced to play full time.
I agree. I agree. I think that's a good one. Same thing with Trice. Trice is really good hands. I worry about the athlete. He's stiff. I don't like stiff edges.
I don't like that either. No.
Yeah, not a fan. I think you gotta have a little bit of limberness to you. Yeah, some twitch to you. Trice is good though. He can play through the body. He's got good hands. Really, really smart football player. I think he's a solid player at the NFL level. I don't know that he's someone I want Miami to take at 55, but if they do, shoulder shrug. I mean, sure. Booker's tough because he hasn't played a lot of football. Honestly, I thought he was going to go back to school. And he decides to come out. He didn't test well. He's really small. I want to look it up. He's like really small. Real quick, Austin Booker is.
I got 6'4", 240, but that might not be accurate.
6'4", 240 is correct. Okay. So 6'4" is not bad. 240 is third percentile for weight among edge rushers. 240 is like linebacker weight, like middle linebacker weight, right? So this is a player who, when you watch him on tape, he's got a lot of speed and a lot of explosiveness on tape. Did not translate to his testing. He didn't jump particularly well. Vertical jump only in the 41st percentile. His broad jump was 73, which is good, but that 10-yard split really worries me. 30th percentile among edges. I like to see that number pushing the 50-60 range. You want your edges to be explosive in short areas. And if you're 240 pounds and you're not explosive in short areas, I'm not really sure what you're doing for me. Now, with that said, Booker on tape is a lot more explosive. So if you're betting on his tape and what you see, when he's just beating the crap out of Illinois' offensive tackles in that game, right, when Kansas played them, he had some good reps against Texas, some good reps against Oklahoma, where he's just using his hands to disengage, cornering really well. He's a lot more limber than someone like Braylon Trice. So there's a developmental pass rusher in there that I think is really interesting, but Booker, for me, is not somebody that I would consider a 55. He's more of like a day 3 guy to me, because I think you're really like truly throwing a dart at a board and hoping he grows into something that he's not right now.
Yeah. If the Dolphins wait and say rounds 1 and 2, they go offensive line, they go something else, and they wait till later rounds, who are some late round guys that you kind of like, that you think might be flying under the radar, some sleepers at the edge rusher position?
So 2 guys I'll highlight. The first is Gabriel Murphy, Liatu Latu's teammate from UCLA. He also has a brother in the draft, Grayson Murphy. I think Gabriel is the best of the bunch. For me, with Murphy, I think he's really technically sound. I think you can put him on the football field and he might get you 3 to 4 sacks as a rookie, which honestly for a rookie edge rusher really isn't bad when you look at historical production. I think he's going to hold up okay against the run. My concern with him, and the reason I think he goes on day 3, is because he's got really short arms. I don't know how well he's going to be able to get into the chest of rushers and really attack them that way and reset the line of scrimmage. I don't think he's a total 0 against the run. I think he can hold his own, but I don't know that he's going to be necessarily an impact player in that area. The other one is Jalix Hunt from Houston Christian. He was a Senior Bowl invite, so I'm not just out here watching Houston Christian film for the hell of it. He is he's a really interesting player. He was, let me get his numbers up real quick, from Houston Christian. He's a 4-3 outside linebacker. He's a guy that you want standing up, rushing the passer that way. He's a former safety. He started his career at Cornell before transferring to Houston Christian. Ran a 4.64 40-yard dash with a 1.6 10-yard split. Those are solid numbers. So I really like the athlete on tape. I mean, he is just like very clearly more athletic than all of the people he is playing against at Houston Christian. And when you watch a small school player, you want to see that. They should stand out to you immediately. And he absolutely does. I mean, he killed some of those kids, man. Like he sent some of those quarterbacks who look like they're built like me flying. So his film's really fun, but I think he's a day 3 guy. He's a developmental player, but he has the speed, he has the athleticism. And me personally, this goes back to the conversation we had a little bit ago. If I'm going to draft an edge not in the first round, I'm just taking a guy with traits. I'm not messing around with the Braylon Trices. I like Gabriel Murphy on day 3 just because I think he makes an NFL roster and your standards are a little bit lower. But generally speaking, I am taking a guy like Jaylen Hunt, who's just like, I'm going to sit him for a couple years. I'm going to put him in the weight room. I'm going to get him up to NFL speed, and he's going to run around corners. And you know what? He's going to create havoc for me. Those are the types of edges I like to bet on. So if Miami doesn't want to take one in round 1, I think they need to be very careful about just taking a flyer on one of these guys on days 2 and 3.
Okay. Before we get to the tackles, philosophical question. When you look at this Miami Dolphins roster as of today, you look at the needs they got, and we've sort of spoken about a bunch of them, and next we're going to talk about another need. Where do you rank edge rushers on needs heading into this draft? Is it 1, 2, 3, 4?
Is this my opinion or what I think?
Your opinion, because here's why. I think if they don't add one in round 1 or 2, like if they don't take an offensive lineman, they can go out there and sign someone like a Risner. If they don't take a wide receiver, they can go out there and sign an Odell Beckham. If they don't sign an edge rusher, Carl Lawson's out there, but it's like he's the type of player like we were signing the week of the playoff game versus Kansas City. I don't know how much is left in the tank, if anything. It's like if they don't take an edge rusher round 1 or 2 who can get on the field year 1, again, we hope Jalen Phillips is back week 1. Let's say it's October 1st, not the first week of September. What do you do to win games that first month or two? And even if he comes back, he might not be 100%. He might not be the same player either. People have to also factor that in. Like, if they don't get an edge rusher here, I think, in the early rounds of this draft, 2024 might be tough. That's why I think it's a need at the top, because you can pass on other positions and still get a guy who's unsigned in free agency if you don't get what you like in the draft. Edge rusher is one position. I don't think you can.
I think that's a really good argument. I think for me, offensive line is still number 1. It's my thing. I think they need to upgrade the offensive line. I appreciate what they've done in free agency. None of the players they've signed moves the needle for me. I think it's.
But could you get value at 55 with someone like?
Right. So that's the thing.
From UConn,
right?
Who might be able to come and start day 1, and then you take an edge around 1.
That's what you have to consider.
Yeah.
I think like on it. The other thing that I tend to think a little bit more long term than like 2024. So if we want to narrow the view to 2024, I think edge is a good argument for the top need, and then it's probably interior defensive line is number 2, and then honestly, like wide receiver safety is probably goes above O-line for me. My thing with the O-line is, and this, we could do an entire podcast on this, but if you're going to commit to Tua, which it seems like they will, Chris Grier spoke today, they're going to do it after the draft, whatever, blah, blah, blah. We're going to have the debate about whether or not they should or should not do that. They are doing it, right? If you're going to commit to Tua long-term, you got to build the wall of China in front of him. Like it's like, no, like that's not even a knock on him. It's just like true, right? Like he needs that. And I'm not trying to say anything good or bad about Tua. I'm just saying like, that's the type of quarterback that, he needs a really good offensive line. And if you're sitting there at 21, I think this tackle class is just really good. I think they're going to have a shot to take a good football player at a position that I think will end up helping them this year, because as much as I love Teron Armstead, I don't think he's going to play more than like 13 games or whatever. And also help them for the next 10 years, because they're going to commit to Tua for at least 5 to 6 more with a long-term deal, right? So that's why tackle is like my biggest need. But if you want to narrow the view to 2024, the pass rush depth is terrible. They got nobody, right? Their 2 best guys are coming off major injuries. Shaq Barrett's a fine player. He actually had more juice left in the tank than I thought when I watched his Tampa Bay Bucks film this past year. I think he's going to be fine for them, but they don't really have anybody else. Like nobody. So I totally get it.
Yeah, which I get it too. If they want to play a long game, like if they take someone like Mims, let's say, I'm not going to be mad. I'm fine with that, because I understand if we're going to pay this kid, a 5-year deal extension, build up around him. Build up that offensive line, get the left tackle to replace Armstead. Heck, he might have his job by like week 6 for all we know. I mean, that's not a joke. At some point, if he keeps getting hurt, Armstead's like, why are we putting him back out there? It's like, so I get it, but I also know, you got an old owner who's sick of waiting around a long time.
No, it's fair.
He might be
it's
like,
totally
look,
fair.
I didn't pay you guys to go through a second mini rebuild here in the middle of the first rebuild that really gave me nothing. Find me some guys who can help me win this year. So that's the philosophy. And look, I don't know the answer. You don't know the answer. But that's the most interesting thing is the roster construction aspect of this draft. Because if what you pass on and you can't get in this draft, can you get in free agency? And I think with Odell Beckham, clearly at wide receiver for 1 year, you can. At offensive line, there's a couple interior linemen. You got to hope Lamb plays just as well as he did last year when Armstead goes down. With edge rusher, and also with the next position, defensive tackle. They signed 5 defensive tackles. God bless them. Not one of those guys is really any good. I mean, people are talking about Benito Jones, who played 15 games, had 13 tackles. I mean, it's like if he's the shining star of the group we got, I mean, that's trouble. And people go, it's going to be a rotation. Well, if the whole rotation really ain't any good, I mean, great, we're rotating in bad guy to take out a bad guy. It's like I'm not that hyped up on that group, which is why I think those two positions are the biggest needs heading into this draft. As I know every fan listening is screaming offensive line. I get it. Okay. Before we get to the defensive tackles, a quick read regarding the Jaylen Waddle Youth Football Camp. It's a place to be this summer. Join the Miami Dolphins Star on June 22nd in Fort Lauderdale for skill building, fun, and memories that'll last a lifetime. Visit JaylenWaddleCamp.com and register while spots are still available. Each camper will receive a limited edition t-shirt, a souvenir autograph, and a team photo with Jaylen. Check out JaylenWaddleCamp.com to learn more. That's JaylenWaddleCamp.com. See you on the field. This is open to boys and girls, grades 1 through 8. Okay, defensive tackles. Is Murphy from Texas the crown jewel of this class, or is Newton close to him? Or is Newton higher in your book?
I think Newton's better, personally. I don't think that's how it's going to go in the draft. If I remember correctly, I actually have Newton a lot higher than Murphy, and we can kind of get into that.
Peter Schrager's got him in round 2. Mel Kiper's not saying you're wrong and they're right. I'm not. But the most, from the bigger name guys, they all got him in round 2 now, not round 1. I'm a big Newton guy. I don't watch as much tape as you or those guys clearly, but I see a first-round player on him. But some of these other guys who are a little tied in, they're saying round 2. That's why I phrased it that way.
No, if you ask me to predict who I think is going to go first, I would tell you it's going to be Byron Murphy, and I would tell you it's going to be comfortably Byron Murphy. However, I think Jerzon Newton's a better football player, so that's where I've got him. I just think Newton's tape is so good. It's so good. It is just him consistently stacking and disengaging every single rep that he gets against the run, as a pass rusher, outside zone, inside zone, gap power, big guards, smaller guards, more agile. It doesn't matter. Newton's beating them all. He beats every single one of them almost every single snap. It's just some of the most consistent, technically sound film that I've watched from a defensive lineman in a minute. The problem with Newton, and I think the reason that the NFL is going to be lower on him, and I don't think he gets to round 2. If Dan Campbell doesn't take him at 29, I'd be shocked. This is the most, I don't know. I don't think he gets there. He shouldn't get there. But if Dan Campbell doesn't take this dude at 29, I would be floored. Absolutely. This is the most Dan Campbell player of all time. But I think for Newton, the reason that not every NFL team is going to love him, he is not the prototypical, explosiveness, pass rush winner. He doesn't have long arms. He's kind of short. He almost looks like a fire hydrant moving around out there. That's not typically the type of interior defensive lineman that teams take in the first round. They tend to gravitate toward the Byron Murphys of the world, who's a little bit bigger, has longer arms, is a bit more of a traditional pass rush winning style, right? Where he's just like an athlete. Murphy just wins with quickness. He's quicker than the dude on the interior. He gets that half-man relationship. He just runs right by him, creates pressure, makes TFL. He's like a very traditional. It's very easy to watch Byron Murphy be like, that's what the best pass rushing defensive tackles in the NFL look like. And I totally get that. And I really like Byron Murphy. I think he's a good football player. I'm lower on him than consensus. He's actually outside my top 30 overall players in this class. I think he's going to go much higher than that. I think he probably goes top 25 minimally. But I think my concerns with Murphy are I think he's a little bit less refined than people are talking about. I don't see a lot of like pass rush moves, pass rush counters. I think he's inconsistent against the run, but generally speaking, he has all the talent, athleticism in the world to be a very good defensive tackle. So I get it. For me, it's Newton. And I think Newton is probably my second favorite Dolphins pick. I'd put it like right behind Amarius Mims and a little bit ahead of Liatu Latu and Jared Verse. Those would be like the four guys I would target overall at 21. And Newton for me is just, he's plug and play. I think you get him in there with Zach Sealer and you're just set for like a really long time. I think he's a great football player. The idea of him getting to work with Anthony Weaver is really appealing. The same thing goes for Byron Murphy, but Newton for me is just a really underrated player. I'm shocked that he's getting pushed this far down boards. I understand teams liking Murphy over him, but him getting out of the first round would shock me. I just think the tape's too good.
So you think if Miami took either one, because I think there's a chance either one of them could be on the board for Miami.
Yeah,
they're both a good scheme fit. They're both a fit, good pick. No problem if they took either one of these guys in.
Yep, I would be fine with either guy. Obviously, prefer Newton,
but
a
little
Murphy,
better, but yeah.
Murphy is totally fine. I get it, right? Like it's not like one of those picks where it's like, oh my god, like what are we doing here? It's like I get it. Like Murphy's a good player. There's plenty to like about his tape at Texas. I just think he needs a little bit more work to get there.
Are there any other tackles who could slide into round one? Or Chris Jenkins, the kid from Clemson, whose name I have no chance of pronouncing. Sweat there from Texas. He just got arrested. That's probably going to have him fall deep into round two, if not into round three, maybe. Any other guys sneaking into round one?
The only way another defensive tackle sneaks into round one is if somebody puts a lot of weight on Darius Robinson and kicks him inside. I think, honestly, I think there is a cliff behind Murphy and Newton, like a big one, like maybe an entire round.
And like edge rusher type. If you don't get one in round one,
yeah,
you might be better off waiting.
Yeah, the edge thing's more historic, right? Like I think this is a more of like a class problem. Like I don't think this interior defensive line class is that good. I think it's like very average. And so for me, like if you're going to attack that position and you're Miami, if you care about that position, I think you have to invest in it at 21. That's just my opinion. We can talk about guys who they could take at 55. There's plenty of them. I wouldn't do it personally.
Yeah, let's talk about a couple of them because you never know with Chris Grier.
Chris
Jenkins, Braden Fisk, and the kid from Clemson, and also Tavondre from Texas.
Yeah, so I'll start with Chris Jenkins. He's a really good run defender. I think he's just got a really low floor. He's the type of player who you plug him in, he defends the run for you. Almost, you remember what Christian Wilkins was like in like years 1, 2, and 3, right?
That's kind of what they need. On
level. So it wouldn't be a bad scheme fit. I just wouldn't take him at 55, I don't think.
Yeah.
But again, if you trade back, if they take him at 55, it's fine. Like I get it, right? Like it's another one of those picks. It's like, sure. Like he's going to get on the field. He helps you. So I like Chris Jenkins. He would be like the next guy up for me. He's my IDL 3. Braden Fisk is, man, I really worry about him.
It's a ball of energy.
Yeah, he is. Now the effort's phenomenal. I think the natural athleticism is all there, but his tape's really inconsistent. This is a player who came from a smaller school, transferred up to Florida State, had a nice game to start the year against LSU, and then he just like kind of vanished for a bit. And then the last couple games of the year, he kind of came back. I mean, he killed Louisville. That was some of the best film that you'll put on that you'll see this year. But the rest of his film is really inconsistent. To me, he's like a little bit more style over substance right now. And I don't like the idea of drafting a player that I think needs a lot of development who's also played 5 years. Because then I have to ask the question, why aren't you better? You've been in college football for 5 years. But I like Fisk. I wouldn't take him at 55. I would be kind of against that pick if they took it. That's not one of those where I'd be like, I get it. Nah, I don't like Fisk that high. Sweat off tape, 55, sure. Right? Like that.
There's everything else.
Here's the thing with Sweat. And look, I'm not a GM. This is not sourced. I wouldn't draft him. I wouldn't. He'd be off my board. Like the problem.
Yeah, there's a lot of red flags there.
The issue here is like You are 2 weeks away from getting drafted, and you can't call an Uber, man. Come on.
Fix stupid. Hey,
come on now. You're 2 weeks away from making millions of dollars. You can't call an Uber.
I don't know how many years ago this was. Oh. I saw on it was something from NFL Films with Jimmy Johnson on a boat with Bill Belichick, and they were just talking about coaching and drafting and life. This was probably 7, 8, 9 years ago. I don't know how long it was. And they're laughing on the boat. And the one thing they agreed on, they go, I'll take anyone in the draft. Just don't give me someone who's stupid. You give me someone who's stupid, I can't do it. He goes, and they both said, I can't fix stupid. He goes, you give me someone who's short. You give me someone who's slow. I will work and find a way to make it work. I cannot fix stupid. And I don't want to call the kid stupid because I don't know the whole story. But it's not just that story. There's other stories too. It's like at some point you got to grow up in life. And it sounds like he's not there yet.
Yeah, I mean,
Chris Grier will probably take him.
But Dane Brugler wrote about this in The Beast on The Athletic. He said, hey, teams had questions for Sweat about his partying when he was a freshman at Texas, and he kind of reassured them. They're like, hey, I've grown up since then. I don't think he has.
Here's the other thing, too. When he was recently arrested a week or so back, the blood alcohol level was so high. For someone his size, they said, how to get it that high, how much could he have possibly been drinking? It had to be an insane amount because for someone like a short, scrawny accountant, it takes a couple drinks and you might get that high. This guy's a monster of a man. For him to get that high, was he drinking by the bottles, not glasses? I mean, it was crazy. So There's a lot. Okay, we spent enough time. I don't want to totally pile on the kid. The next group, one name who's been like a fast riser. I know you're probably not going to have him around 2 is Mason Smith from LSU. People like him. Dwayne Carter from Duke, I've heard a lot of positives about, and Michael Hall from Ohio State. Anything there that you like? Not at 55, but if they trade back round 1 or 2, maybe pick up a pick in round 3 or 4, those guys in play there?
Yeah, I think so. Hall, for me, is like a pure gap penetrator. He is a designated pass rush guy right now. I don't have any interest with him playing the run at all. You put him in on 3rd and long and you hope he gets after the quarterback. He's really quick. He's really explosive. So there's like a rotational player in his profile. And I think that's the most valuable rotational player that you could have at defensive tackle is just somebody who gets 5 sacks and 25 pressures a year. Sure, that works. Mason Smith, honestly, I had a first round grade on him over the summer. And he just wasn't very good this year. And there's some injury things there. He just didn't bounce back quite the way I wanted. But you want to talk about tools? He's got every tool you could possibly ask for: quick, fast, long, big, everything that you could want. So if you're going to throw a flyer on a guy on day 3, Mason Smith's really appealing because I think he's a developmental starter. I think he's got everything that you could ask for. The last guy you asked about was Dwayne Carter from Duke. Multi-year team captain, strong against the run, really smart player. I think he's a low floor guy. I think he gets on the field, he plays okay, but not somebody that you're going to develop into a really good pass rusher or plus starter for you, but can be a part of a rotation. So if the Dolphins don't care about IDL and they want somebody who's going to just be okay for them on day 3, I think Dwayne Carter is a better choice than somebody like Mason Smith or Michael Hall. I think those guys have more upside, but lower floors.
Yeah, we got a question for you here in our chat. Someone asking about Christian Boyd.
Christian Boyd, the best combine snub of the year. So he did not get invited to the combine after he wrecked the East-West Shrine game. I have not done a full tape eval of him yet, so I won't speak in too definite terms. But when you watch him play, the games that I have seen of him, you see an NFL caliber pass rusher. And so when you have that trait, I think that automatically makes you draftable, right? So I feel very similarly, at least on a preliminary watch, to the way I feel about Michael Hall, right? So I think he could be a rotational pass rush player, somebody who gets into the game, gets after the passer on 3rd and long, can generate some pressures for you. But based on what I've seen, I think Boyd needs to round out his game to become a starter. But again, on day 3, that's kind of what you're getting. So he should have. I can't believe he didn't get a combine invite because he's very clearly an NFL caliber player. So would not be opposed to Miami taking him late at all.
Any sleepers here, late round guys that you think, hey, if he's there around 6 or 7, let's take a flyer?
Honestly, no. but I'll throw out some names anyway. I'll throw out some names anyway. Just some guys I think are kind of interesting. Leonard Taylor from Miami, I think is like kind of interesting. He's got the pass rush thing. He's really fast. He's quick in short spaces. He can get after the passer. I just think his tape this year wasn't very good. He's really undersized. You're worried about him playing against the run. I don't love that. McKinley Jackson is everything I just said on its head. He's a nose tackle from Texas A&M, big bowling ball type player. I think he might end up being the first nose tackle taken because I don't know that T'Vondre Sweat is going to get drafted, if I could be completely honest. We'll see. His tape's good enough, but I think Jackson could be the next nose tackle up, which could push him up the board, frankly, but he's pretty much the only other nose tackle I have ranked. So those would be two guys that I think are interesting on two completely opposite ends of the spectrum. Jackson's your run defender, Taylor more of a pass rusher.
Yep. So those are the two positions. Again, I think they are two of the bigger positions in need. I've seen some mock drafts this week. PFF put out an interesting one. It's not a bad mock draft. I just think it would hurt Miami in 2024. We're in round 1. They had them taking, let me open this up. I forgot right now. I think it was Graham Barton in round 1, which is fine. Graham Barton. Then in round 2, Xavier Worthy, which look, your offense is going to be even more exciting than it was last year. You're going to have someone to put on that offensive line is going to start day 1. It's probably going to be pretty good for you. But what do you do on defense then? I think that's a lot of question marks there if you go that way. There was the Mel Kiper, Field Yates. They did a 3-round mock where they sort of like alternated picks. Jared Verse round 1, Cooper Beebe round 2 from Kansas State, I believe. If they took him in round 2 with Verse in round 1, you'd be like, I mean, obviously with the pick in round 1, it'd be very good. But in round 2, you'd be like, that's a pretty solid draft, you think?
Yeah, I feel great about that. I think that would be good. Predictively, I really don't think they're going to take an interior defensive lineman at either pick.
I tend to agree with it.
I really don't.
Group. He's a premium position guy at the end of the day, Chris Grier. Say what you want about him. He likes his edge rushers. He likes his corners. He likes his wide receivers. He likes his offensive tackles. I think offensive tackle or edge in round 1 is where he's going, all depending on what edges are there. And if not, he'll maybe fall back to an offensive tackle. Hopefully someone who can play guard in year 1. If not, then I think he'll wait and fans will be mad as hell. And then round 2, all bets are off the table because then he can just sort of hone in on like need with a marriage of who's like the best player left on the board. So, but round 1, I agree with you. With that 5th year, he views it as he should. He's not wrong. That 5th year option on a high price position like offensive tackle, wide receiver. Look at what Smith just got from the Eagles, what Waddle is about to get hopefully from Miami. You know, those premium positions are premium for a reason. They're damn expensive to keep those guys. So he wants that 5th year option of being able to control them at a reasonable price.
Yeah, I think so. And we can talk about this on the next show, and this is going to make people mad. I think corner is the 3rd most likely position that they go in round 1.
Hey,
I think it's edge, I think it's tackle, and I think it's corner. I really like.
It's Cooper DeJean who can play corner and also be that like 3rd safety at times, or on the field, because he can. From what I've seen and from what I've read, as I said, I think I said this last week. Pat Kerwin, Jim Miller, Sirius XM NFL Radio. They've done mocks every week. They have Cooper DeJean on the mic. They think safety is their biggest need, and they think he can be a 3rd safety in a big nickel package and also help them at corner. If it's him, again, fans are going to be mad as hell. I understand it, though, because if you're not going to have a good pass rush and teams are going to run the ball, you better be able to stop you got to do something on defense you can hang your hat on. So you better have a damn good secondary to shut down opponents if you don't have a front 7 that's going to be dominant versus the run, and you don't have much of a pass rush. So if they go, look, Jalen Phillips, we're looking October, Chubb, who the heck knows, pass rush might be weak. Well, the secondary has got to be able to hold up then.
Yeah.
Not just for this year, but then next year and beyond, because Kendall Fuller wasn't like he was signed for like 5 years. He got a modest 2-year deal.
Again, we'll get into this next week, but I see corner as a need. Like, I get it, right? And I think people are going to say, oh, what about Cam Smith?
Smith, yeah.
You need 3. You need 3 corners at all times who are good football players. And I think like Kader Kohu's like fine. I think you can survive with him in the slot. But you got to understand, like, Kendall Fuller is not long for this world. Like, he is not going to be around forever, maybe 1 or 2 years. I wouldn't even be shocked if it's only 1 year, if we're going to be completely honest. Jalen Ramsey's an older player. I don't like the cliff will come for him at some point. And again, I think people are just kind of assuming that Cam Smith, because Vic Fangio didn't like him, that like he's just all of a sudden going to be a very good football player, right? Like people are just like, Vic Fangio didn't like him. They didn't give him a chance. And you know what? That might be true. I hope it is, because I liked Cam Smith's film in college.
But the other side might be true too.
But he also might not be good. We don't know. And so that I don't think that's true, because again, I like this film in South Carolina, but there's a non-zero chance that is just that Vic Fangio was right. Vic Fangio's a pretty smart guy.
Here's what I'm going to say. Chris Grier has found cornerbacks undrafted like Kader Kohu, Nick Needham. Everyone thinks he's great at finding, corners. When it comes to drafting corners, Noah Igbenogany, I think Cordrea Tankersley was him. I'm pretty sure it was him.
Yeah.
The track record ain't so hot. So yeah, you could say he found a guy undrafted. There's a lot of luck involved with that. I mean, let's be honest. There really is.
I think when it that was the old coaching staff.
Yeah, it probably was. But overall, yeah. But again, we'll talk about that next week with the secondary. It's going to be interesting because again, just because it's like everyone. Here's a funny thing about Cam Smith. When they took him around 2 last year, you and me might have been the only 2 fans of Dolphins that are actually happy. Like, this is a good pick. I understand why they're doing it. Every fan was pissed. Fast forward 365 days later, Cam Smith, they want to put him on Mount Rushmore next to Sam Madison and Patrick Surtain. The kid hasn't even played yet. It's so funny how the tide turns, because now Vic Fangio's been painted as this evil old man. And it's like, well, Cam Smith must be great. Well, here's what I'll say. As I've said all offseason, then we'll wrap up. Vic Fangio, with all those injuries, navigated every stinking one of them and finished the year with a top 10 defense. He was picking up guys on a Tuesday, started them in a playoff game on a Saturday, and it's not like the Chiefs are going up and down the field on us. Yeah, they scored, but they didn't like run it. I mean, he calls a hell of a game, and I know some of the players didn't like him. I get it, but not everyone loves their boss. So it's like, I don't know. We'll see as I've said, we'll see who's right and wrong. If the Eagles are outstanding this year on defense, Miami made a mistake. If the Eagles stink this year and there's a mutiny there with the players, then Miami made the right move. We don't know. And to assume that we know now is a little short-sighted. So we will see how this plays out. Dante, thank you for your time tonight. Everyone, be sure to follow Dante Collinelli at Dante Collinelli on Twitter and read his work at alldolphins.com. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram threads at Dolphins Talk. Visit the website, DolphinsTalk.com. And again, folks, wherever you're listening, hit that subscribe button. If you're watching on YouTube, smash that like button and make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel, as draft night and the Friday, we're going to have wall-to-wall coverage with a bunch of people popping in and out. You don't want to miss that. Everyone, we'll talk to you again after a while. And folks, don't forget, we must put an end to highway profanity.